The Thing Beneath. Part 1. The Miners. The Cayman drill bit into the xenolith 212 meters below the surface, and Dmitry Sokolov felt the vibration through his entire body, from the soles of his magnetic boots to the base of his skull, where his synapse neural interface pulsed a steady green and fed telemetry directly into his visual cortex. The rock here was unlike anything he had seen in 12 years working the mines of the outer belt. Instead of the familiar bands of ferromagnetic basalt or the loose regosilicate for which Hadar's moons were known, the drill head faced a monolith with an unnaturally smooth texture, glimmering a cloudy violet beneath the LEDs mounted above their visors. Sokolov glanced at the data window hovering in the lower left corner of his vision. The interface unfolded a spectral analysis, and the numbers looked wrong. Silicon, carbon, traces of yttrium, and something the onboard analyzer could identify only with a question mark. 47 years of life, 23 of them spent underground, had taught him not to trust beautiful stone. Claire always said he was paranoid. Rowan would correct her. Not paranoid, professional. Both were waiting for him on Elysia 3, in a small dome on the shore of an ammonia sea, and both had made him promise to come back in one piece. Pavlovich, cut the speed by a third, he said into the communicator built into the faceplate of his Carapace Mark 7 suit. You wound me, Dmitri. I know this Cayman better than I know my own right hand. Andrei Pavlovich Voronov's voice came through with the characteristic hiss of atmospheric interference. The senior driller had been born beneath the Olympus City Dome on Mars. Frequencies wandered down here in the depths of Kepler 442d, distorted by magnetic anomalies that the Geological Division of Helios Primatech modestly described in its reports as seasonal disturbances. And I know plenty with that right hand, if you catch my meaning. Laughter rolled across the shared channel. Soren Dare, the Icelander from Europa, laughed. So did Luke Moreau, descended from a mixed Franco-Polish family on Titan. Idris Nasser, born in an Azerbaijani colony on Ganymede and responsible for the cooling emulsion feeding the drill, joined in. Even silent Pavel Zorin, the youngest of the crew, a 23-year-old from the Proxima orbital cluster, snorted into his microphone. Mikhail Belov, the support engineer from the Novosibirsk Dome on Callisto, a man who laughed less often than any of them, gave a quiet chuckle. Pavlovich, you felt your way around half the Hadar system with that right hand, Nasser said. Leave something for those of us who are still young. You're 38, Idris. What part of you is young? Your back creaks louder than the Cayman. At least I don't loosen mine up alone. My Samira. Enough about Samira, Moreau cut in. Every shift, the same thing. My Samira, my hands, my back. Get to work, you degenerates. You're jealous, Luke, Nasser shot back. Because the only woman willing to put up with you is Iris. Iris, the autonomous AI aboard the Perun module, did indeed speak to Moreau more often than to the others. Luke played chess with her through his neural interface in the evenings and insisted she let him win. Iris doesn't snore, Moreau replied evenly. Sokolov did not smile. He was watching the rock. The tungsten carbide composite drill head, rated to cut diamonds formed in planetary mantles, had suddenly slowed as though it had struck something elastic. Not hard, elastic, as if the xenolith yielded under pressure and then recovered its shape. Beside the drill stood an Ant-6 service biorobot, a semi-organic machine that came up to a man's waist, with 6 manipulators made of synthetic muscle stretched over a titanium frame. The ant handled the crude work, clearing spoil, changing drill heads, carrying tools. Its simple processor was incapable of anxiety, But Sokolov noticed that the machine had frozen in place. Its sensors had detected the anomaly before the humans had. "Pavlovich, stop. Full stop." To his credit, Voronov reacted instantly. The drill's howl died, and silence flooded the tunnel, sudden and dense. Kepler 442d possessed an atmosphere of its own, a nitrogen-oxygen mixture rich in argon. Its surface was covered by fields of so-called coral heather, violet silicon-based vegetation whose hollow stalks chimed like thin glass in the wind. Beneath it spread carpets of mica moss, flat, scale-like organisms that shifted from turquoise to black depending on the intensity of the star's radiation. A beautiful planet. Alien and unlivable without a suit, but beautiful. At a depth of 212 meters, there were no sounds except the clicks of life support systems inside their suits and the distant hum of the ventilation loops. And now, Sokolov heard something else. It hovered at the edge of perception. Rhythmic, not mechanical. It was not really a sound at all, but a vibration caught by the neural interface and translated into an auditory image. The rhythm resembled a heartbeat, but it was too slow, too heavy for any known organism. One dull impact, followed by a pause long enough for 3 full breaths, and then another. A wild, freezing thought came to him. They were not drilling into an ordinary xenolith. They were drilling through a shell with a heart behind it, and now, disturbed, that heart was waking and gathering speed. "What is it, boss?" Nassar asked, moving closer. His suit, spattered with gray emulsion, gleamed faintly in the work lights. Idris looked over Sokolov's shoulder and fell silent. The rock in front of the drill head was moving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly. The violet surface rippled like the skin of an enormous sleeping creature disturbed by touch. "What the hell is that?" Idris said softly, stripped of his usual swagger. Sokolov raised a hand for silence. The neural interface registered his rising pulse, and a yellow stress monitor icon appeared in the corner of his vision. He brushed it away with a practiced mental gesture. The Ant 6 backed away from the wall. Its manipulators folded tight against its body, and the diagnostic light on its back shifted from green to orange. Its processor could not feel fear, but it had classified the situation as abnormal and retreated to a safe zone. The machine was smarter than the men. "Everyone move 30 meters back from the face," Sokolov ordered over the shared channel, keeping his voice low. "No panic, no questions. Pavlovich, pull the Cayman away from the wall. There, Moreau, come down here, but stop at the control marker. Belov, step away from the wall." Belov was closest. The support engineer had been working directly at the face, installing reinforcement arches along the newly exposed section. His suit was almost touching the violet surface. "Mikhail, back, now!" Belov did not answer. "Mikhail!" Nothing on his channel. His icon remained green. Vital signs normal. Voice channel silent. Sokolov turned. Belov stood at the wall, motionless. His right hand, still holding the fastening gun, rested against the violet surface. Where they touched, the glove had lost its shape, spreading as if the suit's composite had softened. Fine threads stretched from the wall to the glove, then from the glove to the forearm, webbing the sleeve. Before Sokolov's eyes, the web thickened into a solid violet sheath. Mikhail did not move. He did not try to pull away. He stood like a post, his face behind the visor relaxed, empty, expressionless, as though someone had switched off everything human inside him. "Mikhail!" Dmitri lunged toward him. Nassar caught him by the shoulder. "Dmitri, don't! Look!" Sokolov looked. The wall behind Belov opened. It did not crack. It did not collapse. It opened like a mouth, a throat, something for which no human word existed. The violet mass formed a hollow, and something breathed out of it. Not air, not gas. Something Sokolov's neural interface could not identify, labeling it unclassified aerosol exposure. The suit's sensors spiked. The chemical composition of the material emerging from the wall changed every fraction of a second, as though it were rebuilding itself on the atomic level, cycling through molecular combinations, searching for a key to the suit, a key to the man inside it. Belov began to move, not by himself. His body tilted backward toward the wall, and the wall accepted him. Violet matter flowed around the suit, climbed his legs, his torso, his helmet. For one instant, the visor remained clear, and Sokolov saw Mikhail's face, calm, eyes closed, asleep. Then the visor filmed over in violet, and Belov disappeared into the wall. No sound, no scream, no trace. The wall did not merely swallow the support engineer. It began to digest him in front of them, turning the process into a grotesque display. A vast raised relief of a human body in a suit surfaced beneath the smooth violet membrane and slowly stretched in every direction, violating every imaginable law of anatomy. Mikhail's arms lengthened by a full meter beneath the film. His joints twisted into impossible angles, while his helmet flattened into a hideous oval mask. Armor and flesh fused at the molecular level, forming an entirely new substance in which thick blue-gray veins pulsed, pumping a dense, luminous fluid. Through the translucent membrane, Sokolov saw Mikhail's ribs and skull dissolving in an acidic medium, then assembling into other, inhuman structures. For a fraction of a second, his friend's face bulged through the rock, larger than life. His mouth gaped in a soundless cry of pain. His eyes had become bottomless black pits packed tight with writhing microscopic threads. Then the distorted face was sucked back into the living monolith with a wet, smacking sound, leaving only rings spreading across the smooth surface. Sokolov's neural interface suddenly went berserk. It caught fragments of residual neural activity from Belov's dying brain and fed them directly into the commander's visual cortex. They were not words, not pleas for help. They were raw, unfiltered emotion, primal terror, the sensation of falling forever through absolute frozen darkness, and the lucid awareness of one's own body being slowly reduced to its basic elements. Dmitri clenched his teeth until they ground together, trying to block the flood of another man's agony, but the system ignored him and forced him to experience his friend's death from the inside. The icon marked M. Belov changed from green to gray. At the same moment, the link to Perun went dark. The relay was silent. Sokolov's interface displayed broadband signal suppression, local source, check equipment. The equipment had nothing to do with it. The thing waking inside the wall was jamming communications, deliberately, like a combat system cutting its enemy off from support before doing anything else. "Holy Mother," Zoran whispered somewhere above them in the workings. The wall pulsed in a pattern, not randomly, at intervals of roughly 4 seconds. Each pulse pushed the surface outward by a barely perceptible amount, as though something on the other side were pressing against it, testing the space for weakness. Where Belov had stood a minute earlier, the violet mass bulged into contours vaguely resembling a human figure. The contours drifted, warped, dissolved, and returned, as if the entity were attempting to reproduce the shape it had consumed, but could not decide why such proportions were useful. The Ant-6 stood 5 meters from the wall. Its sensors were still scanning, and through his interface, Sokolov could see the data the biorobot transmitted. The spectral profile of the violet surface changed every second. Its atomic lattice rearranged itself in real time, switching among crystalline structures, none of which matched any known mineral or synthetic material. This was not an organism in any conventional sense. It was a substance capable of becoming anything: metal, organic tissue, gas, plasma, cycling through states the way a person selects tools from a box. Combat form. The words surfaced in Sokolov's mind with the clarity of a nightmare. He had seen them in old classified Helios Primatech reports, documents he had read during sleepless nights after shift at Vostok 7 lunar base. Artifacts of non-humanoid origin. Remnants of civilizations that had vanished long before life appeared on Earth. Precursors. Algae. Builders. Xenoarchaeologists had dozens of names for beings no one had ever seen, beings whose traces had been found on scores of dead worlds. Their weapons, if the reports were to be believed, could rebuild themselves on the subatomic level. A weapon someone had buried here, or abandoned, or lost, hundreds of thousands of years ago, perhaps millions, long before coral heather covered the surface of Kepler 442d. And Sokolov's crew had woken it with a drill. "Dmitri," Dare said, sounding as if he were forming the words with lips alone. "We have to go." Sokolov nodded. The movement of his helmet reflected in Nassar's visor. "Fall back through the tunnel, quietly, no running. Zorin, you're first. Moreau behind him. Pavlovich, leave the Cayman." "The Cayman costs 3 years of my pay," Voronov objected automatically. "And you're worth nothing at all. Move." "What about the Ant?" "Leave it." They began to retreat. The tunnel the Cayman had bored over 3 weeks sloped back and upward toward the distribution shaft, then the surface. 212 vertical meters once the turns and transfer chambers were counted. The gravity lift could carry 4 at a time, 2 runs, 7 minutes each. Sokolov backed away last, never taking his eyes off the wall. The violet mass settled. The human-like contours dissolved, and the surface became smooth again. Only the pulses accelerated. 3 seconds, 2.5. It was gathering speed. Dmitri tried to contact Perun. Iris, anyone. The neural interface swept frequencies, tried narrow-beam pulses, switched to backup channels. White noise on every band. The entity had created a zone of radio silence around itself, precise, absolute. No signal could pass through 200 meters of rock, saturated with its presence. "Don't run," a voice suddenly said over the shared channel, making Sokolov stumble. It was unmistakably Byelov's voice, but hideously distorted, stretched as if played from an ancient, worn tape. There was no pain in it. Something worse, emptiness and surrender. "It doesn't hurt here. It's quiet. It wants to understand." "Mikhail?" Nassar breathed, looking fearfully at the walls. "It wants to know what it is like to be us," the thing continued. Alien grinding harmonics now threaded the voice. "It wonders why we walk, why we speak, why we fear." Moreau swore and quickened his pace. Sokolov ordered his interface to block the channel, but the voice continued until they rounded the next bend. They were not speaking to their dead friend. The entity was probing them, practicing human speech and emotion through the processed brain and vocal cords of the first person it had taken. They had gone 20 meters when the sound changed. The silence left behind by the stopped drill ceased to exist. A low-frequency hum took its place, so deep their suits could not screen it out. The vibration came from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, everywhere. Dmitri stopped and turned. The tunnel walls were moving. The violet xenolith they had mistaken for a vein of rare earth elements, the reason Helios Primatech had sent them 1,000 light-years from home, was no vein. The monolith buried beneath Kepler 442d was waking, and the tunnel cut through its body was closing. The rock did not crumble. It flowed, changing physical state on the molecular level, becoming viscous, then elastic, then rigid, selecting the most efficient configuration for movement. At the face, the abandoned Ant 6 was dying. Sokolov watched the final seconds through its sensors. Violet matter flowed over the machine, entered through the seams in its housing, dissolved the synthetic muscle fibers in its manipulators. The ant tried to escape. Its processor triggered a self-preservation routine. Limbs jerked, legs scraped the floor. Useless. The mass absorbed the biorobot in 30 seconds, dismantling it atom by atom, sorting organic matter from metal, assimilating both. The diagnostic light flashed red and went out. In the last instant before the signal died, Sokolov's interface received a final data packet. Not telemetry. An image from the ant's cameras, distorted and breaking apart. For a fraction of a second, Dmitri saw the tunnel through the entity's senses. A world composed of temperatures, electromagnetic fields, and atomic lattices. The humans at its center glowed like 5 bright, slow-moving fires made of complex, nourishing, easily absorbed compounds. The image vanished, but the certainty remained. They were not merely being hunted. They were being scanned and assessed as food. The entity had just fed on titanium, tungsten, and synthetic muscle. And it had learned something new. "Run," Dmitri ordered. "Everyone, run! Get to the lift!" Dare bolted first, Nassar behind him. Voronov, broad and heavy at 40, his bad knee treated with equal parts neural stimulation and profanity, ran after them with labored strides. Sokolov brought up the rear. The tunnel was narrowing, not quickly, slowly enough to make every centimeter obvious. The walls, 4 meters apart a minute ago, were now separated by 3.5. Their surface developed rings, like the growth lines in a tree trunk, except the rings moved, flowing upward, each one carrying tiny projections that opened and closed like gills or mouths or organs with no counterpart in terrestrial or known extraterrestrial biology. Then limbs appeared, from the walls, from the ceiling, from the floor itself. Thin ones, thick ones, branching ones. Some resembled tentacles, others root systems. Still others mechanical manipulators, as if, after consuming the Ant 6, the entity had copied the logic of its design and was now attempting to reproduce jointed limbs from its own tissue. The copies were wrong, like a child's drawing that caught the shape but not the function. Joints bent the wrong way. Fingers branched, multiplied, merged again. A human face appeared with a screaming mouth and vanished at once. The geometric order of the laser-baked tunnel dissolved into a living nightmare. Corners softened. Straight support lines bowed beneath the swelling biomass, making the mine resemble the pulsing intestine of some colossal subterranean predator. Thick clots of gray slime began to drip from the ceiling, eating through basalt grit beneath their boots with a soft, sinister hiss. The the stagnant air filled with an unnaturally dense haze of microscopic spores that glowed a sickly pale green and clung stubbornly to helmet visors, reducing already poor visibility. Every step became harder. The heavy soles of their magnetic boots sank into the softened violet floor as though the miners were running through glue. The ground sucked wetly beneath them and periodically rose in sharp ridges, as if trying to catch their ankles and drag them down. Wet, asymmetrical slits opened and closed across the transformed walls. From them burst jets of scalding vapor, carrying the nauseating odor of burned, rotting meat. The tunnel lights had shattered and gone dark. Only the beams from their helmets remained, and those disappeared helplessly into the dense, violet fog. The entity did not seem eager to attack outright. It was playing with them, savoring their panic, studying the chemistry of their primitive fear. It tasted their terror through sensors in the walls, sampling every bead of adrenaline like a connoisseur before the main course, preparing to consume them not only physically, but psychologically. Zoran screamed, "God damn it!" Sokolov saw it through the tactical cameras on their suits. Zoran reached the first bend, and a mass emerged from around the corner to meet him. Not a limb. A wall-to-wall bulk that filled the passage, pulsing and covered in mouth-like openings the size of a human palm. Inside each mouth, something gleamed with wet nacre, shifting through colors impossible for organic matter. The sheen moved from violet into ultraviolet, beyond human sight, and the neural interface painted in false hues that made Sokolov's temples throb. Moreau, running second, managed to stop. He caught Zoran by the shoulder plate and hauled him backward. The young man stumbled and dropped to one knee. "Reverse! Back!" Moreau shouted. "Passage blocked ahead!" "Behind us, too," Sokolov said. He did not shout. His throat had clenched, and the only sound he could produce was an even mechanical tone that seemed to belong to someone else. "Dare, charges. Side drift 12 meters back along the left wall. It connects to the ventilation shaft." Dare was already moving. He tore a GR-40 directional mining charge from its mount on his thigh. It was designed to breach rock rated up to 9 on the Mohs scale. He armed the mechanical safety and pressed the sensor. The indicator changed from white to red. 30 seconds. Everyone around the corner into the cutting station recess. They crowded into a shallow equipment bay carved into the wall. Sokolov counted helmets. 5. All present, all who remained. The blast struck short and dull. The directional charge punched a section from the wall, opening a passage into the lateral drift that led toward the ventilation shaft. Narrow, barely wide enough for a suited man, but it went upward toward the distribution level. "Go!" Dmitri shoved Zoran through the breach. The young man squeezed in. Moreau followed, then Nassar, Dare, Voronov. Sokolov entered last. The drift remained intact. A narrow corridor 3/4 of a meter wide, its walls unfinished. The rock here was different. Ordinary gray basalt from Kepler 442d. No violet sheen. No pulses. Dmitri felt a flicker of relief and crushed it at once. "Vent shaft in 40 meters, Dare said, checking the mine plan through his interface. 170 meters straight up to the surface. Emergency ladder, 1 person at a time. We climb in a line." "Comms?" Nassar asked. "Dead. White noise on every frequency. The thing's suppressing us. Maybe we can punch through from the surface." No one answered. They moved through the drift, their lamps picking wet walls, streaks of condensation, and dead lighting cables out of the darkness. The system had been down for 2 weeks. Sokolov walked second to last and kept looking back. Beyond the breach, his lamp could not reach the main tunnel, but his interface registered seismic activity growing in amplitude. The entity was rebuilding the rock around itself and expanding its zone of control. Its presence could be felt as pressure on the eardrums, as the taste of metal on the tongue, though a sealed suit separated their mouths from the mine atmosphere. It was moving after them. 20 meters. The drift walls remained gray and normal. Another 10. "Boss," Zoran said, his voice trembling. "Behind us." Dmitri turned. A violet stain was spreading across the wall where they had entered through the breach. The rock was changing. Ordinary basalt filmed over with a translucent layer patterned by rings. The film did not merely coat the surface. It entered the basalt's crystalline lattice and rebuilt it, atom by atom, converting dead stone into part of itself. Gray became violet. Rigid became mobile. The boundary between normal rock and the entity blurred by the second. "Run!" They ran. The drift was too narrow for speed. Suits snagged on walls, cables, and projections of stone. Voronov began to wheeze. His breathing hissed harshly over the channel. The ventilation shaft opened before them as a vertical well fitted with a steel emergency ladder anchored to the wall. Circular, 1.20 meters across. "Zorin, up. Moreau after him. Nassar, Dare, Voronov. I'm last." Sokolov assigned the order while tracking the violet film through his interface. 20 meters away. 15. Zorin climbed. Moreau followed. Nassar. Dare paused at the shaft entrance. "Second charge," he said, looking at Dmitri. Expressions were hard to read through two visors, but Dare's eyes remained calm and focused. The Icelander from Europa, accustomed to ice caves, cave-ins, and sudden death, regarded the crisis as a technical problem. "I'll collapse the entrance. Might slow it down. A GR-40 drops 6 cubic meters. If that thing passes through basalt the way it passes through its own violet material, it won't be enough, but it may buy a minute or two. It has to restructure the rock atom by atom. That takes time." "Set it." Dare fixed the charge to the ceiling above the vent shaft entrance, armed it, and set a 60-second timer. Then he climbed. Sokolov followed. Voronov was last. They climbed rung by rung inside the echoing metal tube, surrounded by the sound of their own heavy breathing. The interface counted down to detonation. 40. 30. 15. The explosion came from below as a dull blow that rang through the ladder brackets, the shaft walls, their bones and teeth. The ladder shuddered, but held. Dust surged upward, flowing around their suits, swallowing the beams from their lamps. They kept climbing. 100 meters. 120. 140. Voronov fell behind. "Pavlovich, don't stop," Dmitri said, keeping pressure out of his voice. He had known Andrei for 9 years. They had worked asteroid mines together. They had survived the decompression of a habitat module on Callisto, where Belov had also been present, and Mikhail had sealed the breach with construction foam. Belov, who was now inside a wall, or had become the wall, or no longer existed in any human sense of the word. 30 meters more. "Dmitri," Voronov said, stopping. "My leg." He looked down. A tendril had pushed through the wall of the ventilation shaft, straight through the steel liner, and wrapped around Voronov's left ankle. Violet. Ring-patterned. Small mouth gills opened along its surface, and Sokolov saw the suit begin to lose structure where they touched. The carapace Mark 7 composite clouded and turned porous. The entity was not cutting or melting it. It was rebuilding it at the atomic level, turning the polymer composite into something permeable, something suitable for absorption. Voronov jerked his leg. The tendril held. "Cut it," he said. An emergency plasma cutter hung from Sokolov's belt, industrial grade. He snatched it free and activated it. A narrow blue tongue of plasma flared in the gloom at 3,000 degrees. Dmitri aimed it at the tendril. The plasma touched the violet surface, and the limb reacted. It did not recoil. It did not burn.
The ring patterns accelerated, and the surface at the point of contact changed texture, becoming mirror smooth and reflective. In a fraction of a second, the entity rebuilt its outer layer into heat-resistant ceramic, cycling through atomic configurations until it found the optimal one. Plasma slid across the mirror finish without effect. Two more tendrils emerged from the wall beside it, thicker, faster. "Hold on, Pavlovich. I'll try the base." Sokolov drove the cutter into the point where the limb emerged from the wall. The liner metal ran, exposing the stone beneath. The stone was violet. The entire ventilation shaft wall, along its full length, had already transformed behind the thin skin of steel. They were inside the creature. A second tendril coiled around Voronov's thigh. A third slipped beneath his life support pack. Wherever they touched the suit, the armor dulled, lost color, lost strength. The entity dismantled polymer molecule by molecule, carefully and methodically, like a surgeon opening tissue. No haste, no violence. Patient, engineered precision. "Dmitri, go. Don't give me orders. You've got 2 wives on Alicia, both gorgeous. Don't ruin their lives. Pavlovich, get out of here. That's not a request." Another tendril came from above and dropped across Voronov's shoulder like a whip. Something opened at its end, a large mouth-like organ 15 centimeters across, rimmed with serrated growths. Not sharp, but gripping, designed to hold. The growths shifted constantly, sprouting new teeth and dissolving old ones as the structure refined itself. The organ pressed against Voronov's helmet. "Go!" he roared. Sokolov climbed. He climbed and he listened. Voronov's communicator kept working. Composite armor grinding under pressure. The hiss of decompression. A wet, organic sound, as if something had opened and closed around something soft. A short breath cut off halfway through. It was not the scream of a wounded man. It was a deep, almost relieved exhalation, as though the pain Andrei expected had turned into something beyond physical sensation. Or perhaps there was no pain at all, only a cold chemical invasion of the nervous system. That unnatural calm frightened Dmitri more than any death cry could have. Voronov's voice vanished, replaced by the wet crunch of faceplate polymer breaking and the loud snap of severed communication wires. Yet the data channel did not close completely. The impossible entity connected itself to the helmet transmitter and used Andrei's blood-soaked vocal cords as an organic resonator. A hideous cacophony filled Sokolov's ears, torn fragments of his friend's memories and thoughts. He heard the bright laughter of Andrei's former wife, the deep roar of Martian dust storms, the steady rhythm of the Kaiman drill, and the thin crying of a long-forgotten child. The sounds merged into a single vibrating current that pressed on his mind, driving him toward madness, forcing him to doubt his own reality and the integrity of his senses. The ancient entity was broadcasting the disassembly of a human consciousness in real time. It broke Voronov's memories apart, brick by brick,
preserving useful information about human vulnerabilities and discarding emotional fragments as worthless biological waste. Then, Voronov's communicator went silent. The icon marked A. Voronov changed from green to gray. Dmitri climbed. His hands moved mechanically. His body functioned on its own, separate from a consciousness that had fallen into a blank white space. He knew the state. Protective shock. It would pass. Then everything would hit him. Unbidden, Claire and Rowan appeared before his inner eye. Claire, dark-haired, born on Io, with a habit of frowning whenever she worried. Rowan, red-haired, from Triton, with a low, warm laugh that loosened something inside his chest. Both stood in the doorway of their dome, orange Elysian sunset pooling at their feet. The top of the shaft. A hatch into the distribution chamber. Zoran, Moreau, and Nassar were already out and waiting. Dare reached down and helped Sokolov through. "Voronov?" Dare asked. Dmitri shook his head. Silence.
Nassar turned away and braced both hands against the wall. Zoran sat on the floor and wrapped his arms around his knees. His shoulders shook in small, rapid tremors. "Move," Sokolov said, and was surprised by how normal his voice sounded. "Distribution chamber, horizontal tunnel to the main shaft, then the freight lift to the surface. 5 of us. 1 trip." "If the lift still works," Moreau said as he stood. "If the thing hasn't eaten the power system." "We'll find out." The distribution chamber measured 10 meters by 10, with a 3-meter ceiling and walls clad in steel panels. The lights worked. White industrial light, gray walls, gray floor, everything in its place. A second service biorobot, Ant 11, stood in standby mode in one corner, its indicator glowing green. The machine did not know that its partner no longer existed. Sokolov was watching the hatch through which they had climbed. Along the seam between the cover and the floor ran a hair-thin violet line, like a crack, a vein in a leaf, a vessel beneath skin. "Don't stop. Tunnel. Now." They ran. The horizontal tunnel to the main shaft was 4 meters wide and 3 high, lined with concrete segments. Ant 11 followed, activated by a mental command from Sokolov through his neural interface. The machine might still be useful. At the 100-meter mark, Moreau's foot sank through the floor. The concrete, apparently solid, sagged beneath him and swallowed his boot to the ankle. He jerked free. Violet slime clung to the sole of his suit. "The floor's alive!" he shouted. The entity was not merely following them. It had surrounded them. It was moving through rock, concrete, and steel, rebuilding the atomic lattice of every material and converting the mine's infrastructure into an extension of itself. Rebar, carbon fiber, polymer seals, everything became raw material. It consumed not only organic matter, but matter itself, reducing it to atoms and assembling those atoms into its own tissue. The main shaft, the freight lift. The indicator panel glowed green, working. "Load in." They sprinted onto the platform. Ant 11 jumped aboard last and hooked its manipulators around the railing. Sokolov struck the control panel. The platform shuddered. Magnetic coils began to hum, and the ascent started. 30 meters to the surface. 25. "The walls," Zoran whispered. A violet film coated the shaft's concrete rings in an unbroken layer. Small, thin tendrils grew from it and reached toward the rising platform. 20 meters. 15. A limb as thick as a human thigh pushed from the right-hand wall and slammed into the railing. The metal tube folded like wire.
The limb whipped toward Nasser and wrapped around his forearm. At contact, its surface changed instantly from smooth to coarse, sprouting microscopic hooks that had not existed a second earlier. Adaptation in real time. Nasser screamed, "Get it off me! Get it off!" Sokolov grabbed the plasma cutter and struck. The blue tongue bit into the violet surface. The limb froze for an instant as it rebuilt its outer layer into mirror ceramic. Dmitri seized the pause. "Idris, pull! Your arm, pull!"
Nassar wrenched backward. The limb slipped from the now smooth sleeve. Idris dropped to his knees. The armor over his forearm had lost integrity, and his interface flashed red. An emergency membrane inflated and sealed the breach. 10 meters. 5. The surface hatch. Automatic doors parted, and daylight flooded the shaft. The platform rose into open air. They jumped onto ground covered in rigid coral heather, its stalks crunching like broken glass beneath their boots. A weak wind carrying the caustic tang of argon brushed their suits. Ant 11 leapt after them and drove its manipulators into the soil. Here, on the surface, the signal suppression weakened. Sokolov's neural interface caught a faint transmission. Iris broke through on an emergency frequency with a narrow beam from orbit. "Sokolov crew, I have your biometrics. Report status. Communications lost for 16 minutes. Silence protocol active." Iris's level, emotionless voice sounded to Dmitri like the voice of God. "Iris, Omega priority. Active xenoform discovered in the workings. 2 personnel lost, Belov and Voronov. Entity can restructure matter at the atomic level, consumes organic and inorganic material, suppresses communications, adapts to attack. It is reaching the surface. Prepare docking node. We're coming up in the Buran." A pause. Half a second. An eternity for an AI of Iris's class. "Understood, Commander. Docking node 3 prepared. Biosecurity protocol active. Operator Anton Cherkasov and Dr. Sergei Lebedev have been alerted. Recommend immediate evacuation at maximum speed. I detect anomalous seismic activity centered on your workings, spreading at 12 meters per minute." 12 meters per minute. The landing pad was 200 meters away. "To the shuttle!" Dmitri shoved Zoran forward. "Run!" They ran across the heather. Glassy stalks rang and snapped underfoot. The orange sky hung low. Hills rose on the horizon beneath groves of snakebrush, silicon-based growths with thick, scaled trunks that curled into spirals whenever the wind changed. The landing site. The Buran K sat on it, squat and broad. Modular containers stood nearby, along with a habitation block and power station. Everything untouched. "Dare, charge Crate in the depot. Moreau, help him. Pavel, get to the shuttle and start the pre-launch sequence." "I'm only a third-class pilot," Zoran protested with a sharp shake of his head. "Autopilot will carry you. Start it." Pavel sprinted to the side hatch. The door rose and he dived inside. Dare and Moreau ran for the depot. Steel door, keypad. Dare entered the code and hauled out a green case stamped GR40, 12 units. "Got it." Sokolov stood beside the shuttle, watching the mine shaft. Something poured out of the hatch. Damn it. Violet mass spilled over the rim and flowed across the ground like lava without heat or light. It covered the soil and swallowed the coral heather. Stalks caught in it did not break. They dissolved and were drawn inward. Their silicon organic structure was processed almost instantly. Enriched by the new material, the mass accelerated, shifting into a more efficient mode of locomotion. Its shape changed. The leading edge rose and thickened. From the flat flow emerged something alien and without analog. Neither humanoid nor animal. A structure that combined crystalline order with organic fluidity. Its facets shifted every second, and each new configuration appeared more purposeful than the one before it. Multiple mouth-like openings flexed in a continuous rhythm. Their inner surfaces shimmered beyond the visible spectrum, and Sokolov's interface invented colors before losing track of the changes. Membranes stretched between arching ribs. They looked like sails, but were opaque and dense, rippling like the hide of some enormous animal, shivering with every breath. It was not breathing, it was scanning. The membranes sampled air vibrations, electromagnetic fields, gravitational gradients, anything that might give the entity information about the world into which it had emerged. It was studying. Adapting. New limbs pushed from the base of the mass, long, segmented structures with pointed ends that stabbed into the ground and drove the body forward. The creature rose onto legs, not human legs, legs that might have belonged to something evolved under different gravity, different geometry, a different logic of survival. The central structure reached 5 meters, 6, 7. It grew by feeding on heather and soil, processing silicon, carbon, metals, water, anything within contact range. No terrestrial organism could do this. No technology known to humanity after 1,000 years of expansion among the stars could reproduce it. This was the weapon of a civilization so advanced that biology and engineering had ceased to be separate concepts. Pavel, status. Pre-launch started. Reactor warming. 3 minutes. The mass had covered 100 square meters. Its rate of advance increased. Smaller forms detached from the main body and raced through the heather, throwing out temporary limbs that formed, pushed, and retracted. Dozens of fragments, each the size of a large dog, fast and coordinated, moving like a pack or like the fingers of a single hand. From the corner of his eye, Sokolov saw one fragment stop abruptly. It did not attack. Its flat body flowed upward into a rough human shape, hastily assembled, with arms too long and no head. It turned toward them and copied, with disturbing accuracy, the gesture Zoran had made a second earlier when he stumbled. One arm flung out to regain balance. "It's copying us like an ape," Pavel whispered, his face draining further. "An ape doesn't understand atoms," Dayer snapped, without slowing. "It isn't copying. It's learning to be us, learning how we move so it can catch us." Ant 11 stood at the edge of the landing pad, its sensors sweeping the approaching mass. Sokolov sent it a single neural command. Delay. The biorobot obeyed. It turned toward the mass and advanced, manipulators spread, blocking the way. A ridiculous gesture. A semi-organic machine facing a substance that could rebuild matter. But the ant followed orders. The first fragment reached it. Ant 11 clamped its manipulators around the thing and tried to hold it back. Synthetic muscles tightened. The titanium frame groaned. The fragment flowed around the limbs and climbed toward the body. Ant 11 met the same fate as Ant 6, but this time Sokolov watched from outside. The machine sank into the violet mass like a body into quicksand. Wherever the substance touched titanium, it took on a metallic sheen, assimilating the new material. 20 seconds later, only the biorobot's indicator remained visible. It flashed red and went dark. But the 20 seconds it bought were priceless. "There, charges!" Soren armed 4 GR-40s, set 15-second timers, and threw them one after another toward the mass. The cylinders stabbed into the ground in front of the leading edge. "Everyone aboard!"
Nassar climbed through the hatch one-handed. Moreau jumped in after him. Dare passed the case of remaining charges to Sokolov. The detonations struck. 4 directional blasts tore chunks from the entity and scattered pieces across the heather.
The fragments writhed and crawled back toward the main body. The mass slowed. Its leading edge collapsed, arches folded, and membranes withdrew. It was rebuilding itself to compensate for the damage, and that took seconds. Precious seconds.
2 minutes, Zorn called. Sokolov stood at the hatch. Dare climbed inside. Dmitri, jump! Soren shouted. 1 minute! The mass moved again. Reconfiguration complete. This time it wasted nothing on vertical structures. It flattened, becoming thinner, wider, faster. A wave of violet matter rolled across the ground, absorbing everything in its path. The habitation block sagged. Its walls softened, ran, and drowned. The power station tilted. Containers vanished one by one. Sokolov armed the last 2 charges in his hands, set 10-second timers, and threw them in front of the pad. He climbed into the shuttle and struck the hatch control. The door began to descend. A thin violet tendril slipped through the remaining gap. It entered the cargo bay, extended half a meter, and stopped, quivering as it sampled the air.
Its surface shifted to match the temperature and chemistry inside the shuttle. Microscopic mouth gills opened and tasted. Moreau grabbed a mounting bar from the emergency kit and swung. The bar pinned the tendril against the closing hatch. The door sealed, severing the limb. A 20-centimeter piece dropped to the cargo deck and thrashed like a fish on land.
"Don't touch it!"
Sokolov shouted. The severed fragment stopped moving. Its surface changed, becoming dry and matte. Violet faded to gray. Cut off from the main body, it had lost its ability to restructure matter. Or it was waiting. The charges detonated outside, rocking the shuttle.
"Launch!"
Dmitri burst into the cockpit. Zoran sat in the pilot's seat, hands resting on the arm supports while his neural interface fed impulses directly into the flight system. Pre-launch complete. Reactor online.
"Thrusting!"
The shuttle roared. It rose hard and emergency fast, the acceleration driving everyone into the deck. Magnetic clamps failed to hold Sokolov, and he slammed into a bulkhead. But the shuttle was climbing. Through a viewport, he watched the landing pad shrink below. Violet mass flooded everything, consuming and rebuilding. Nothing artificial remained where the base had stood. Only an expanding stain of alien substance from which new structures grew, functional, incomprehensible, like the architecture of a civilization whose engineering and aesthetic had no point of contact with humanity's. Arches, spires, membranes. A web of threads strung between vertical forms. The entity was building something. Or remembering how to build. Remembering, after hundreds of thousands of years of dormancy, what it had once done while its makers still existed. The shuttle gained altitude. Acceleration eased. Sokolov's neural interface established a stable link with Perun through the onboard transmitter, and Iris filled the channel.
"Commander, I detect an anomaly on the hull of Buran K. Starboard side, Sector 7. Foreign growth. Spectral profile matches no known material. Recommend external inspection."
Sokolov connected to the exterior cameras. There it was. A violet patch the size of a hand clung to the shuttle's hull beside the main engine nozzle. Ring patterns moved across it. A fragment thrown up by the explosions at launch. It had adhered to the titanium shell and was now spreading centimeter by centimeter. The rings moved faster than those below. Vacuum did not trouble it, and the severed piece on the cargo deck. Dmitri looked back. The gray, motionless fragment lay where it had fallen, but its surface had changed again. Gray had deepened to dark violet. Tiny mouth gills opened. The fragment was alive. Separated from the main body and deprived of mass for growth, it could not expand, but it could rearrange the atoms it possessed. Its shape flowed, lengthened, thinned. A filament as fine as wire extruded from it and crawled across the floor toward the cargo bay wall. "Moreau! The fragment!" Sokolov shouted. Luke saw it. The filament reached the wall and touched a steel panel. The metal clouded at the contact point. Atomic restructuring had begun. Moreau seized the mounting bar and brought it down with all his strength.
Once, twice, 3 times. The filament snapped. The fragment convulsed and sent another thread in a different direction. Moreau struck again. Dea joined him, hammering the thing with a tool crate. It flattened but did not die. Its mass redistributed, spreading thinner and wider, pressing into microscopic cracks in the floor. "This is useless," Soren gasped. "Iris," Dmitri said, switching channels. "Xenophon fragment inside the shuttle. Another on the exterior hull. Need a solution. Fast." A quarter-second pause. "Commander, recommend emergency docking with Perun. Immediate evacuation of personnel. Then shuttle jettison and destruction. The 200-kilowatt shield-class emergency laser can vaporize Buran K in 90 seconds of continuous exposure. Recommend isolating the fragment inside a sealed container until evacuation." "Container," Sokolov said, turning. A transport cryocanister for geological samples stood against the cargo bulkhead. Hermetic, neutron-compacted alloy. "There! Put that thing in the canister." Soren crouched. The battered fragment lay almost flat against the deck. He worked the bar beneath it like a spatula and flung it into the container. The lid slammed. The lock clicked. The seal indicator turned green. A faint scraping came from inside. The fragment was testing the walls, attempting to dismantle the neutron-compacted alloy atom by atom. So far, it could not. The material's density exceeded anything it had encountered. So far. "How long will that hold?" Nassar asked from the corner. "I don't know," Dare said. "We need 5 minutes, no more." 5 minutes to docking. The patch on the hull kept growing. Exterior cameras showed violet film approaching the engine compartment. Fine needles grew from it, piercing the ceramic coating and entering the underlying layers of titanium armor. Each needle transformed the metal around itself and widened the zone of control. "Iris, can you increase maneuvering thrust? We need the fastest possible docking." "Increasing maneuvering engine output by 40%. Warning, acceleration will reach 3.2 G.
Nassar should immobilize his injured arm.
Acceleration pressed them into the benches. Idris gave a short groan through clenched teeth. Moreau gripped the railing. In the cockpit, Zoran flew through the neural interface. His body lay slack in the seat, but his mind was coupled directly to navigation, and the shuttle settled onto course with a precision that would have shamed an autopilot. 3 minutes. Perun grew in the forward window, a silver cylinder girdled by a ring-shaped solar array. Docking lights. 2 minutes. The hull growth reached the engine compartment. Right main thrust fell by 7%. Iris compensated with maneuvering jets. 1 minute. The docking collar struck home with a hard click. "Contact, everyone out!" They rushed through the docking passage. Perun received them with sterile light and recycled air. Cherkasov waited at the airlock. Dr. Lebedev stood beside him with a medical kit. "The container!" Sokolov shouted. "Dare, leave it in the shuttle." "Already did." "Everyone through?" Dmitri counted. Zoran, Moreau, Nassar, Dare.
4. All of them. Cherkasov jettison. Pyrobolts fired. Baran K separated and drifted away. "Laser, now!" Iris aimed the shield without waiting for Cherkasov. 200 kilowatts of continuous energy struck the receding shuttle. The titanium shell opened. The reactor ruptured. A silent, blinding flash. Sokolov stood at the observation port and waited. Debris spread outward. Iris analyzed the spectrum of every fragment. No violet material detected within the debris field. Thermal exposure during reactor failure exceeded the xenoform's estimated resistance threshold. Recommend continued monitoring for 12 hours. Everyone exhaled. Not with relief. They exhaled because their bodies reminded them breathing was necessary. Dmitri removed his helmet and wiped a hand across his face. Stubble, sweat, exhaustion. 47 years old. Vostok 7 lunar colony, which he had left at 24 because the moon's mines had wrung everything from him, sending him farther out among the stars. Mars, Europa, Callisto, the Kuiper Belt, Hadar, and now Kepler 442d, a planet where something had lain underground, something unimaginably ancient and unimaginably alien. Dare approached and sat beside him without speaking. A minute passed before he said anything. "Dmitri, it's still growing down there. Iris has the anomaly expanding at 15 meters per minute. It's accelerating." "I know. Quarantine protocol. They'll close the system. Helios Primatech will pull every asset. If they have time. If it doesn't find a way into orbit." The thought lay between them like the severed violet limb on the shuttle floor. Alive, dangerous, capable of growth. An entity that could rebuild matter at the atomic level. One that adapted to any environment from bedrock to vacuum. One that learned. By consuming Ant-6, it had copied the logic of jointed limbs. By consuming Belov and Voronov, it had gained access to human biology, neural interfaces, and the knowledge stored in 2 human minds. What would it extract from that knowledge? "Iris," Sokolov said, rising. "Send an emergency package to Helios Primatech headquarters, Omega priority. Copy the United Colonial Council and the Terran Institute of Xenobiology. Kepler 442d, Excavation Sector 17. Active xenoform discovered, probably an artificial combat organism. Estimated burial age between 100,000 and several million years. Origin unknown, possibly one of the precursor civilizations. Form capable of self-restructuring at the subatomic level and adaptation to any environment, including vacuum. Consumes organic, inorganic, and cybernetic systems. Suppresses broadband communications within several hundred meters. Expansion rate increasing. Recommendation: immediate quarantine of the system. Absolute prohibition on landing. Consider orbital sterilization. Package compiled and transmitted, Commander. Time to nearest long-range relay, 14 hours. Time to Helios Primatech headquarters, 22 days. 22 days. At 15 meters per minute and accelerating. In 22 days, the entity would cover. Dmitri stopped himself from calculating. The interface supplied the answer anyway. At the present growth curve, the entire continent in 11 days. He turned away from the window. Zoran sat on the floor against a bulkhead. His face was gray and hollow. 23 years old. On Proxima, boys entered the mines at 18. He had worked underground for 5 years and, until today, had never seen anything that could not be explained by geology, physics, or somebody's mistake. Now he had. "Commander," Pavel said, opening his eyes. "What was that?" Sokolov sat beside him and remained silent for a moment. "I don't know. A weapon. A very old one. Somebody made it. Somebody buried it. Maybe they abandoned it. Maybe they used it and forgot it. We found it." "Belov and Voronov, are they dead?" Dmitri did not answer immediately. He thought of Mikhail's face in the last moment. Calm, eyes closed, asleep. And of Andrei's breath, almost relieved. What had they felt? What had it done to them? Reduced them to atoms like the ant? Or something else? Something no word existed for because no human being had survived it and returned to explain. "Yes," he said at last. "They're dead." Zoran nodded and closed his eyes again. Sokolov leaned back against the wall. Eyes closed. Darkness. Faces in the dark. Claire frowning. Rowan laughing in that low, bright voice. Both in the doorway of the dome. Sunset at their feet. He would return to them. In 22 days, an answer would come from Helios Primatech. Perun would leave orbit. The system would be sealed. Below, on the surface of Kepler 442d, the ancient weapon would continue to grow, patiently and unstoppably, rebuilding the world into itself and remembering what it had once known, back when its makers walked among the stars and fought wars whose scale and purpose humanity could not even imagine. It would consume the coral heather and the snakebrush, the mica moss and the basalt plains, rivers and hills. It would process the entire planet atom by atom and become the planet. And then, perhaps, it would look up. Sokolov opened his eyes. "Iris," he said, "begin Perrin's departure sequence. We're leaving the system. Now." "Understood, Commander. Course to nearest inhabited station, 17 days in hyperspace. Beginning main drive warm-up." Dmitri stood. His legs held. His hands did not shake. Not yet. Later, when Perrin entered hyperspace, and the distance between them and Kepler 442d began to be measured in light years, it would hit him. He knew that. But now he had to act. Now he had to take the living as far as possible from what they had awakened in the rock they drilled for money, for a contract, for the lives waiting for them on Elysia 3, Proxima, Ganymede, Europa, and Titan. He passed Dr. Lebedev as the medic dressed Nassar's arm, past Cherkasov bent over a console, past Moreau sitting motionless, staring at the wall, past Dayer at the observation window, looking down at the planet beneath the orange light of an alien sun. "Soren," Sokolov called. Dayer turned. "We're alive," Dmitri said. Soren nodded. He did not smile, but he nodded. And Perun began to wake, preparing to carry 7 human beings away from a world that no longer belonged to humanity, if it ever had. Part 2. The Crowned. The yacht Seraphima Auroris glided through the void on sublight thrust, its hull clad in nanocrystalline pearlite that shimmered beneath distant stars. 320 meters from the forward spire to the aft stabilizers. 14 decks. A conservatory of living trees brought from New Tuscany, their leaves producing oxygen scented with lavender. A variable gravity pool where water formed floating spheres and bathers swam inside them like fish in weightless aquariums. A winter garden. A ballroom.
a suite the size of a country estate occupying the whole of Deck 3. Her Highness Ilara Seraphine Luminelle de Solène Vert, Crown Princess of the Aurelian throne, third in succession to the crown of the 12 spheres, stood before the panoramic window of her private suite and watched unfamiliar constellations scattered across the darkness. Their strangeness made them thrilling.
Starlight lay across her face, and that face deserved the light that fell upon it. Genesis Prima, the embryonic correction procedure reserved for the ruling houses and highest aristocracy of the 12 spheres, had shaped every feature long before her birth. During the 4th week after conception, when the embryo was no larger than a poppy seed, nanosomata from the royal genetic chamber entered its DNA and rewrote the sequences governing facial structure, bodily proportions, pigmentation, bone density, and neural response speed. Ilara Seraphine's hair was platinum white and heavy as liquid light, falling below her hips. Every strand possessed the ideal cross-section written into her genome, incapable of dullness or breakage. Her large, slightly tilted eyes carried a color unknown in nature. Cold azure, flecked with gold around the pupil, designed by chamber geneticists exclusively for House Solène Vert. Her skin was flawlessly smooth, porcelain pale, and faintly luminous from within. Bioluminescent proteins introduced into her genome activated as ambient light dimmed, turning the princess into a living work of art. She was 24 standard years old. 6 days ago, she had married. "Does your Highness intend to admire the void all morning, or might your Highness be persuaded to have breakfast?" The voice behind her was soft, deliberately formal, with an affection beneath the ceremony that had grown over many years. "Beatrice, I asked you to use my name in my private rooms." "Forgive me, Your Highness. Habit." Beatrice de Clermont, chief lady's maid, was a 50-year-old woman of minor nobility from New Burgundy. She stood at the entrance to the sleeping alcove, with a breakfast tray floating above her palms on an anti-gravity cushion. Porcelain cups bore the crest of House Solène Vert, a golden sun crowned by 12 rays. They did not tremble. "Where is my husband?" Ilara Seraphine asked. "His Grace Duke Cassian rose an hour ago and is now in the fencing gallery, training with Argus." Cassian Alexander Reinhardt von Ravenholt, Duke of North Avalon, heir to House Ravenholt, one of the 4 great houses supporting the Aurelian throne. Genesis Prima had given him a height of 1.93 meters, an athletic build with ideal ratios of muscle to fat, dark hair with a copper sheen, and eyes the color of deep amber. His jaw, cheekbones, and brow made his face look carved from stone in portraits. In life, mobile expressions softened it, along with a habit of narrowing his eyes whenever something amused him. 27 years old, graduate of the Ares Prim Military Academy on Mars, captain in the Crown Guard, veteran of 3 campaigns in the border sectors. His marriage to Ilara Seraphine had sealed an alliance between 2 great houses and secured a political balance the 12 spheres had not enjoyed for half a century. But that was not why she had married him. She married him because, at the winter solstice ball 3 years earlier, he had asked her to dance and stepped on her foot. The heir to House Ravenholt, graduate of Ares Prim, captain of the Crown Guard, had crushed the toes of the Crown Princess, turned red to the roots of his hair, and said, "Forgive me, Your Highness. I can command a battle cruiser, but apparently not my own feet." She had laughed. For the first time in her life, she laughed at a formal function and broke protocol. That laugh changed everything. "Tell Cassian I expect him at breakfast," Ilara Seraphine said, turning from the window. "And tell him to shower.
I have no intention of eating with a man who smells of sweat. At once, Your Highness. Beatrice. Forgive me. At once, Ilara. The maid withdrew, her steps nearly silent on the deep pile floor. The princess settled into a chair that adjusted to her posture, reshaping itself to support her back and arms perfectly. On the floating tray Beatrice had left behind stood cups of the finest bone china, embossed in gold with the crowned 12-rayed sun of House Solène Vert. The princess reached for one. The coffee had been brewed from beans grown in the yacht's conservatory. Thick, almost oily, it smelled of bitter chocolate with a faint trace of musk. The variety had been developed specifically for the royal family. Its flavor was faultless, and its stimulant effect arrived gently, without tremor or increased heart rate. Ilara lifted the cup. The sleeve of her weightless robe slipped to her elbow, exposing the crown's 7 neural interface bracelet on her wrist, an aristocratic model in white gold, set with sapphires. Mass-produced units, such as the Synapse 4, used by workers, engineers, and colonists, were embedded at the base of the skull and showed as small, ugly swellings beneath the skin. The crown was worn like fine jewelry, and linked to the nervous system through dermal microcontacts, invisible to the eye. The bracelet pulsed in time with her heartbeat, projecting navigational data onto the inner surface of her eyelids as translucent glyphs suspended in the air. The yacht was in the Kepler 442 system, an outer development sector owned by Helios Primatech. Their honeymoon route, meticulously arranged by Crown Protocol, crossed 17 star systems. From the ceremonial worlds of the Inner Ring, with their ancient cities and artificial moons, to exotic planets in the border sectors, where nature still retained its wild, primordial force. Kepler 442 appeared on the itinerary as a purely transitional point, unworthy of even a brief stop. An industrial system with a single oxygen atmosphere planet, one mining operation, and a standard orbital module. Ilara Seraphine finished her coffee and reached for the second cup when the suite door slid aside and Cassian entered. His hair was still wet from the shower. He wore the light shipboard uniform of House Ravenholt, midnight blue bordering on black, with silver embroidery at collar and cuffs. He smiled, and the gold sparks in his amber eyes brightened in the light from the panoramic window. "Good morning, my star," he said. He approached, bent, and pressed a light, almost weightless kiss to her forehead. "Good morning, my Duke," Ilara replied, drawing back just enough to look at him. "Beatrice tells me you fenced with Argus. Did you win?" "Argus doesn't understand losing in the conventional sense." Cassian laughed as he sat opposite her and took a cup from the tray. "He's a combat android, not a court flatterer. His algorithms don't include letting me win, but I lasted 12 minutes, 2 longer than yesterday. His AI continuously adapts to my style, so every session becomes harder." He took a sip and closed his eyes in satisfaction. "You take training too seriously," Ilara said, watching him. "We're on our honeymoon, in the safest sector of the galaxy, aboard the most secure yacht ever built. Relax. Safety is an illusion, darling." Cassian's expression sobered, and the professional soldier surfaced in his eyes. "What we call safety is only the temporary absence of an obvious threat. I've seen how quickly that can change. Argus is the only partner who keeps my reflexes from dulling." Between them floated a selection of fruit, each grown in the yacht's conservatory and genetically optimized for flavor, fragrance, and nutritional value. Purple pears from New Tuscany melted on the tongue and left the aftertaste of expensive wine. Citrus globes from Aurelia carried a vitamin complex tailored to the princess's genotype. Ilara took one of the globes. Its thin skin burst beneath her fingers, spraying fragrant juice. "Even so," she persisted, "you might devote more time to rest. Captain Voss says there are interesting places ahead, and that we'll reach the Vega system exactly on schedule. There will be water tournaments there, not duels with machines. Cassian opened his mouth, perhaps to object, perhaps to make a joke, but the sweet intercom came alive. It was built into a small mother-of-pearl panel beside the door. "Your Highnesses," said Captain Alaric Voss, commander of the yacht. His voice was professionally even, with the faintest note Ilara had learned during 6 days of travel to recognize as bad news. "Forgive the interruption. May I request an audience?" Cassian and Ilara exchanged a glance. "Come in, Captain," the princess said. Voss entered.
He was a short, wiry man of 60, a veteran of the Royal Fleet, gray-haired, his face cross-hatched with the scars of a micrometeorite burn suffered 20 years earlier during a border sector patrol. He bowed at the exact angle protocol prescribed when addressing royal blood. "Your Highness, Your Grace, I regret to report a technical fault. The port hyperspace circuit sustained damage during our last transition, a microfracture in the fold chamber. Repairs will require 6 to 10 hours. Further travel under hyperdrive is impossible until work is complete." "Are we in danger?" Cassian set down his cup. "None, Your Grace. Seraphima has a reserve circuit, but activating it requires complete shutdown of the primary. We may drift or, should Your Highnesses prefer, enter orbit around the nearest body. According to navigation data, the system's 4th planet is habitable and suitable for a brief visit. Kepler 442d, an industrial site belonging to Helios Primatech. Standard atmosphere, nitrogen and oxygen, with elevated argon." Ilara Seraphine raised one eyebrow. "An industrial site? Miners?" "Yes, Your Highness. However, the registry contains no record of current active operations. The Perun orbital module is not responding to hails. Personnel may have evacuated, or the station may be operating automatically." "Or its communications are down," Cassian observed. "That is also possible, Your Grace. In any case, the planet is classified as safe. Atmospheric conditions permit light suits. The surface supports native silicon-based vegetation. Geological surveys report no large fauna." Ilara looked at her husband. 10 hours drifting in empty space, or 10 hours above an alien planet. They had spent 6 days aboard the yacht in luxury suited to their station, but luxury had a way of becoming tiresome. "Would you like to go for a walk?" Cassian asked. The boyish curiosity Ilara loved most flickered in his eyes. "On an industrial world? In a suit? You've never seen alien vegetation up close. Silicon-based vegetation. They say it rings in the wind." The princess hesitated. Royal security protocol prohibited landings on unclassified worlds without preliminary reconnaissance by autonomous probes. But Seraphima Auroras carried a complete defensive complement, including 4 Argus-12 combat androids, the most advanced autonomous weapons platforms produced by the Royal Arsenal. Each Argus was a 3-meter transforming machine made from mimetic armor alloy, capable of changing body configuration in fractions of a second according to tactical need. Cruise form for atmospheric flight, elongated, aerodynamic, with deployable nanofiber wings. Assault form for combat, broad and low, with extending weapon platforms and force shields. Reconnaissance form, compact, shaped like a narrow drop, able to enter confined spaces. Each carried plasma emitters, kinetic accelerators, electronic warfare systems, and 6th-generation autonomous intelligence capable of making tactical decisions in nanoseconds. A single Argus-12 could suppress a medium-intensity planetary uprising without assistance. 4 Arguses constituted an army. There was also the personal guard,
6 members of the Crown convoy, elite soldiers in Aegis III power armor, armed with pulse rifles and plasma blades. Every one of them had undergone combat-grade genetic optimization and implantation of tactical neural modules. "Captain, prepare the Olympus landing module," Elara Seraphine said. "We will descend to the surface. Full security protocol, all 4 Arguses, the entire convoy. And have Beatrice prepare my planetary wardrobe." Voss bowed. If he had doubts, his face revealed nothing. "At once, Your Highness. May I recommend a landing on the northern continent, well away from the industrial zone? Orbital images suggest more scenic terrain." "Excellent. 1 hour." The captain bowed again. His face remained an impenetrable mask. He was Old Fleet. To him, commands from the royal family ranked with the laws of physics. They were not to be questioned, only obeyed. He stepped back, waited for the suite door to close, and only then allowed himself to exhale. Voss did not approve of the descent.
The planet was officially safe, yes, but in his mind, safety existed only on the decks of Seraphima Auroris, where every cubic centimeter of air was sterilized and every bolt inspected. Landing on an industrial world seemed an unnecessary risk, a whim of pampered aristocracy that he, Alaric Voss, would be required to cover with his experience and gray hair. But the order had been given. He headed for the bridge, issuing instructions through his neural implant as he walked. Cassian leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and looked at Elara. Irony mingled with mild concern in his amber eyes, and he did not bother to hide either. "You do realize, my love, that we are taking 4 Argus 12 combat androids on a stroll, each worth as much as a light cruiser, plus 6 guards in Aegis armor? We'll have enough firepower to seize a government district on some backward planet." "My father would never forgive me if anything happened," Elara said with a small shrug. It was a slightly spoiled gesture, but in her it was charming enough always to make Cassian smile. Then again, he would never forgive you either. How did he phrase it at our betrothal? "Duke, your foremost duty to the crown is to ensure that not a single speck of dust lands upon Elara." "Your father," Cassian said with a grin, remembering the ceremony, "will never forgive me for marrying you in the first place. To him I'll always be that Ravenholt, the upstart from a great house who dared claim the jewel of Solène Vert." "Nonsense." The princess waved the words away. "He adores you. He simply doesn't know how to show it. In his mind, affection means giving you command appointments and additional subsidies for your sector. And from him, that Ravenholt is nearly a compliment, an acknowledgement of strength." Cassian laughed, openly and without restraint. Elara smiled back, and nothing remained in that smile of the cold, genetically flawless crown princess. For that moment she was simply a young woman in love with the man who, 3 years earlier at the winter solstice ball, had stepped on her foot, blushed to the roots of his hair, and muttered that commanding a battle cruiser was easier than commanding his own limbs. The Aurora Elite planetary suit, built for Elara Seraphine by the workshops of the Royal Chamber of Technology, resembled a spacesuit only in function. Outwardly, it looked like a second skin, milk white and threaded with silver lines of active nanocircuitry, following every contour of her body with anatomical precision. Its transparent monocrystalline diamond helmet was nearly invisible, bending the light only slightly and creating a halo around the princess's head. A force cocoon generated by the nanocircuits protected her from radiation, pressure and temperature shifts, micrometeorites, and light ballistic impact. Beneath the suit, Elara Seraphine wore the ceremonial undergarment prescribed for informal appearances. Photon silk, thin as air and almost transparent,
concealing nothing and never intended to. The body of the crown princess, like those of every member of the ruling house, was considered an achievement of genetic art. Displaying it did not violate propriety. It emphasized the perfection of the bloodline. Around her neck rested a necklace of synthetic star diamonds. Each stone was the size of her smallest fingernail, and each held a holographic recording of the stellar spectrum from which it took its name. Bracelets circled both wrists, the crown 7 and 3 purely decorative bands of lunar silver. Threads of luminous pearl shone in her hair, which had been woven into a loose braid reaching the middle of her thighs. Cassian wore the male version of the planetary suit, dark gray, with the heraldic emblems of House Ravenholt on the shoulders, silver ravens coiled around upright swords. At his belt he fastened a plasma blade in ceremonial scabbard.
An aristocrat's weapon, not a mercenary's, though Cassian used it better than most professional fencers. The Olympus landing module detached from the yacht under escort by 4 Argus 12 units. The combat androids flew in cruise configuration, elongated, winged forms of dark metal like predatory birds. They descended beside the module, 2 to each flank, sensor arrays continuously scanning the surface and feeding data to the convoy's tactical displays. The northern continent of Kepler 442d opened below them. Rolling plains covered in violet coral heather, broken by pink and turquoise patches of mica moss. Riverbeds filled with clear, mineral-rich fluid shone gold beneath the light of the orange dwarf. Snakebrush spread across the hills, its scaled trunks twisting into spirals. As the module descended, goblet lilies became visible, 2-meter silicon organic structures like open bowls, collecting atmospheric condensation. "Magnificent," Ilara Seraphine whispered at the viewing port. "Your Highness, please remain within the security zone established by the Argus units," said Lieutenant Conrad Weiss, commander of the Crown convoy. He was a broad-shouldered native of New Königsberg on Ganymede. 300-meter perimeter. The androids will hold the corners of a square. "Of course, Lieutenant." The module landed gently. Its struts sank into the coral heather, crushing the stalks with a brittle crackle. The ramp lowered, admitting the air of Kepler 442d. The suits filtered it, but a faint metallic astringency still seemed to reach them. The Arguses landed first. 4 dark shapes settled around the landing zone and transformed instantly from cruise to assault configuration, broadening, extending weapons platforms, and bringing force shields online. Their mimetic armor shifted from charcoal to violet to match the landscape. In 3 seconds, 4 machines weighing 8 tons each became part of the scenery, visible only through the shimmer of their fields. The Crown convoy came next. 6 figures in dark blue Aegis 3 power armor, each bearing the gold crest of the throne on the breastplate. Perun M pulse rifles ready, tactical visors lowered. Then the household staff. Beatrice de Clermont, chief lady's maid. Julian Armand, Cassian's personal steward, a slender, nervous man from New Geneva, whose specialty was ensuring His Grace's comfort under any conditions, from a palace reception to a planetary excursion. Theo Bellamy, junior valet, 20 years old and outside the Aurelian system for the first time, gazing at an alien world with delight he tried unsuccessfully to hide behind professional composure. Sabine Delacroix, lady-in-waiting and Beatrice's cousin, a 30-year-old blonde with an easy laugh. Etienne Valcourt, master of ceremonies for the journey, 45, wearing an elegant planetary suit embroidered across the back with his family crest. His duty was to document every moment of the honeymoon for the Crown archive. The princess and duke emerged last. Ilara Seraphine stepped onto the coral heather. The stocks beneath her boot answered with a delicate ring. as if a fingernail had been drawn along the rim of a crystal glass. She stopped and listened. The weak, argon-rich wind stirred the heather, and the entire plain chimed in dozens of interwoven notes.
"Cassian, can you hear it?"
"I can." He stood beside her. "Like an organ. A glass organ."
"Etienne, are you recording?" "Every second, Your Highness."
Valcour activated his holographic recorder. 3 tiny camera drones launched from his shoulder mounts and hovered around the princess, capturing her from every angle. They crossed the plain. Argus units moved along the perimeter, silent despite their mass. Anti-gravity modules let them float a centimeter above the ground without crushing the heather. Convoy soldiers traveled in pairs, ahead on both flanks and behind. The household walked within their protection. The goblet lilies were more beautiful up close. Their translucent bowls were threaded with fine quartz veins and held pools of condensate that glittered like molten silver. Ilara Seraphine reached out and touched the rim of one cup with the tips of her gloved fingers. The wall vibrated and released a long, singing note. "Do not touch it," Lieutenant Weiss said sharply. The princess snatched her hand back and looked at him with the expression women of House Solène Vert used in place of anger, chin slightly raised, eyes slightly narrowed. "Forgive me, Your Highness." Weiss bowed, brief and military. "Unclassified biota. Security protocol." "The lieutenant is right." Cassian gently took his wife's arm. "Let's not touch alien flowers. They may have thorns." Ilara inclined her head. They had been walking for 15 minutes and were 200 meters from the module when Argus 1, positioned ahead and to the left, stopped. The combat android froze in assault configuration. Its sensor cluster, shaped like the flathead of a lizard, turned toward the ground. Mimetic armor flashed from violet to warning orange. The tactical feed available to Weiss through his implant displayed what the Argus saw. The lieutenant went still. "Your Highnesses," he said. His voice, always even and controlled, cracked like ice underfoot. "Please return to the module immediately." "What happened?" Cassian's posture tightened at once, his hands settling on the hilt of his plasma blade. "The ground beneath us does not match the planet's geological profile. At a depth of 2 meters, there is an anomalous substance. Argus classifies it as..." Weiss hesitated. "Biologically active. Expanding." Ilara Seraphine never had time to ask another question. The ground beneath Theo Bellamy, standing 3 meters behind the princess, collapsed. It did not split or crack. It became liquid in an instant, as if someone had cancelled the concept of solidity inside a 2-meter circle. Bellamy dropped to the waist. Limbs rose from the oily violet ground. Dozens of them, thin as fingers, thick as arms, branching, many-jointed. They seized the valet from every side, binding his legs, torso, arms, and throat. His standard civilian suit, designed to resist nothing more serious than bad weather, lost integrity in 2 seconds. Violet substance ate through the polymer and reached the body beneath. Theo made a sound Ilara Seraphine had never heard from a human being. Not a scream, not a moan. A wet, bubbling rasp that ended in a moist click. Bellamy sank. The ground closed over his head, smooth and violet, patterned with rings. Sabine Delacroix screamed. One piercing note tore through the glassy stillness of the plain and sent unseen creatures scattering through the heather. "To the module!" Weiss roared. "Convoy, combat formation!
Argus units, Omega Threat Protocol! The 4 androids responded instantly. Their armor flared crimson as camouflage disengaged and battle coloration activated. Weapons platforms rotated toward the ground. Argus 1 fired first. A blinding blue plasma bolt struck the violet patch where Bellamy had disappeared. The substance absorbed it. It did not reflect the energy. It did not vaporize. It drank the bolt like a sponge taking in water. The surface swelled and rippled. Angular structures sprang upward, resembling antennae or open jaws. They redirected the plasma discharge, sending a blue flash sideways into a field of heather. Stalks vanished across a 5-meter radius. The entity adapted to plasma in 1.5 seconds. Kinetic weapons, Weiss barked. Argus units, kinetic accelerators, maximum rate. Argus 2 transformed. Its upper right limb retracted into the body and emerged a moment later in a new configuration. A 6-barreled accelerator capable of driving tungsten penetrators to 15 kilometers per second. A burst hammered the ground. Violet substance exploded outward, leaving a crater 1/2 meter deep. The fragments moved, crawled back. 3 seconds later, the crater closed. Not working, Weiss muttered. Withdraw. Argus units, covering fire. Slow the spread. The earth changed around them. Coral heather dimmed. Its stalks lost color, turning gray, then violet, then disappearing into ground that was no longer ground. The affected zone expanded in a ring, centered on the place where Bellamy had died. Its radius grew quickly enough to watch. 1 meter per second. 2. Run! Cassian seized Alara Seraphine's hand and pulled her toward the module. They ran. Convoy soldiers surrounded the princess and Duke in a moving ring of armored bodies. Beatrice kept close. Sabine Delacroix ran while still screaming, her cry now a continuous howl that made everyone want to cover their ears. Julian Armand, the steward, ran in silence through clenched teeth, his face pale behind the visor. Valcour threw away his holographic recorder. The camera drones dropped into the heather as he fled with every trace of dignity gone. The Arguses covered the retreat. All 4 opened fire at once. Kinetic accelerators, plasma emitters, thermobaric grenades from shoulder mortars. The ground ahead rose into a wall. A literal wall of violet substance, 3 meters high and 50 meters long, sealing the route to the module. It did more than rise. It transformed in front of them, assuming a shape that seemed deliberately terrifying. Its surface sprouted protrusions resembling faces, not human faces, nothing recognizable. Hollows that might have been eyes, slits that might have been mouths. The forms moved and remade themselves, each configuration more alien than the last, as though the entity were cycling through methods of intimidation without knowing which would work on this particular prey. Argus 3 shifted into maximum assault configuration. Its body expanded to twice its former volume as internal modules unfolded. A heavy plasma resonator emerged from the dorsal segment, a weapon designed to breach planetary fortifications. The beam struck the wall. The barrier split apart. Violet material scattered, opening a 10-meter passage. Argus 3 advanced into the gap, widening it. Its force shield, a hemisphere of shimmering blue, drove the walls aside. Through! Weiss drove the group forward. They charged. Convoy soldiers around the princess, household staff at the center, Argus units on the flanks. The wall answered. Limbs shot from its broken edges, not thin tendrils, but massive segmented arms as thick as human bodies and sheathed in scales that shifted through shades of violet.
One slammed into Argus 3 from the side. The 8-ton machine slid 2 meters. Its shield held, but the android rocked on its supports, and its anti-gravity modules howled. A second limb whipped downward and struck Valcour. The master of ceremonies did not have time to cry out. It wrapped around his throat, lifted him, and pulled him into the wall. The surface closed. Etienne Valcour disappeared. Sabine stopped screaming. The silence after her howl was worse than the sound itself. She stopped moving, simply stood in the middle of the passage, eyes blank and glassy behind her visor. Béatrice de Clermont, 50 years old, 30 years at court, a woman who had witnessed coups, assassination attempts, and poisonings, seized Sabine's suit and dragged her onward. Sabine neither resisted nor helped. Her legs moved, but her eyes remained vacant. Argus 1 launched into the air. Cruise form unfolded, nanofiber wings spread, and the android rose 20 meters to provide an overview. Its sensors transmitted to Vice. The violet zone already covered a square kilometer and continued expanding. Coral heather, snakebrush, goblet lilies, everything vanished into a substance that processed the silicon-based biosphere with monstrous efficiency. Structures grew from the mass. Arches, spires, membranes, threads, forming something like a city or an organism, perhaps both. They pulsed and changed every few seconds, no configuration repeated. The module was 150 meters away. Between them and the lander, the ground remained normal and gray, covered in crackling heather. But the affected zone advanced from both flanks, wrapping around them in a half-ring. Argus 2, Argus 4, slow the flanking spread, Weiss ordered. Kinetic fire into the ground, create a disruption belt. The two androids fired not at the substance, but at normal terrain ahead of its front. Tungsten penetrators tore open the soil, blasting out trenches and craters. Tons of rock erupted into the air, building an improvised barrier. The substance reached the broken ground and slowed. Trenches without solid substrate gave it nothing to push against. It began to fill them by restructuring the atmosphere within its zone of control, compacting nitrogen and oxygen into a semi-solid material from which bridges formed. But that required time. Seconds, precious seconds. 100 meters to the module. Faster, Your Highness! Weiss forced the surrounding guards aside, seized Ilara Seraphine around the waist, and half-carried her. Protocol prohibited touching royal blood without permission. Protocol had no provision for ground being eaten beneath one's feet. The princess did not resist. Her face remained motionless behind the diamond helmet, a mask. Only her dilated pupils revealed what was happening within. Genetic correction had given her perfect beauty. It had not removed the capacity for primal terror. Cassian ran beside her, one hand never leaving his plasma blade. He looked around, assessing the field, and in his eyes burned something Ilara had seen only once before while viewing recordings of his campaigns. The cold, concentrated fury of a man trained to kill. 80 meters. Julien Armand ran to their left when one leg punched through the surface. The ground beneath him was already infected, only a thin skin of normal soil over violet substance that had sent a subterranean feeler ahead of the main front. The steward fell to one knee. Dozens of wire-thin limbs snapped from the earth and wound around his calves, thighs, and torso. Armand screamed, high and desperate. The nearest convoy soldier lunged toward him, caught his arm and pulled. The tendrils held. The guard ignited a plasma blade and hacked at them. 3 severed cleanly, but fresh ones grew from the cuts and reached for the soldier. "Disengage!" Weiss shouted. "Harker, fall back!" Harker ignored him. He kept cutting.
The limbs multiplied, and one slipped beneath the breastplate of his Aegis armor through the seam between plates.
The guard froze, as though something inside him had switched off. His arms dropped, the plasma blade fell to the ground. His body went limp, and the tendrils pulled him under with Armand. Two at once. "Do not stop!" Weiss bellowed. "Do not stop!" 60 meters. Argus 4 detected the underground network. Sensors capable of penetrating 30 meters found violet threads radiating beneath the surface like the roots of a monstrous tree. The threads were extending toward the module. The android transmitted the image to Weiss. "The module is threatened." The lieutenant's face went pale. "Argus 1, scans the ground around the lander." Argus 1 dived toward the landing site and swept the area. Clear. The threads had not reached it yet. 30 meters remained between them and the module, and their rate of advance was increasing. 50 meters. The earth to their left erupted, not from an explosive or impact, but from a reservoir of substance beneath the surface. A column of violet mass shot 15 meters into the air and opened like a flower. Its petals were flat limbs, each covering 10 square meters and stippled with thousands of mouth-like openings. The petals began to fall around the fountain. One dropped over Sabine Delacroix. Beatrice was too slow. She had been pulling her cousin by the hand. When the violet membrane descended like a curtain, Beatrice released her. Instinct. She snatched back her hand and jumped aside. Sabine remained beneath the membrane. It flowed around her and took the shape of her body. 3 seconds later, only a violet cocoon remained. Then the cocoon sank into the earth. Beatrice did not scream. Her face turned to stone. Only her hands shook, especially the right one that had been holding Sabine's a moment earlier. 40 meters. Argus 3, guarding the rear, took the impact of a second pedal. The membrane crashed onto the android, and the 8-ton machine staggered. Its force shield flared, pushing back, but the substance did not retreat. It flowed around the field, searching for gaps, applying pressure from every direction. Argus 3 fired a thermobaric grenade directly into the membrane. The explosion tore the violet sheet apart, freeing the android, but its lower left limb had lost mobility. Armor at the contact point shifted from battle red to dull violet. The entity had begun to rebuild the machine. Argus 3's AI decided in nanoseconds. A directed microcharge severed the contaminated limb. The android shifted to cruise configuration and lifted into the air, compensating for lost mass by retuning its anti-gravity modules. 30 meters. "Cassian, the module!" For the first time in her life, Ilara Seraphine screamed. It was not the voice of a crown princess. It was the voice of a young woman who wanted to live. Desperately. Cassian ran beside her. His breathing remained even, and that steadiness contained all his military training. He assessed the field in motion. His military-grade Tactician 6 neural implant, far beyond any civilian unit, fed Argus data directly into his visual cortex. He saw the subterranean threads approaching the module, saw the fountain to the left releasing new petals, saw the affected zone closing from the right, leaving only a 20-meter corridor to the lander, narrowing every second. And he saw that one guard, Cole, had fallen 5 paces behind. Threads were reaching up around his boots. "Cole, freeze! Do not move!" Cassian shouted. Too late. The threads wrapped around the boots of the power armor. Cole fell. "Keep moving!" Cassian drew his plasma blade. A white blade, 1 meter 20 long, ignited in his hand. He slashed through the threads. They parted, and Cole jumped up, but new tendrils erupted instantly, denser and stronger. "Your Grace, go!" the soldier shouted, shoving the Duke away. "Get the princess out!" Cassian stepped back. 2 steps, and the tendrils had already climbed to Cole's waist. 1 more second, and the guard disappeared into the earth with a raw, tearing scream. 20 meters. 4 guards out of 6 remained. 4 members of the household were gone. 1 master of ceremonies, 1 steward, 1 lady-in-waiting, 1 valet. Dead, or what had happened to them was worse than death, because the entity did not kill in any conventional sense. It absorbed, dismantled, assimilated. No one could say what remained of a person after that process. The module, the ramp. They ran inside, Ilara Seraphine, Cassian, Weiss, the 4 remaining guards, Beatrice. 8 people. "Launch! Immediately!" Cassian shouted at the pilot in the cockpit. "Your Grace, the Argus units are still outside." "They'll follow. Launch!" The pilot engaged the engines. The module shuddered but did not rise. The landing struts. 4 steel legs, each 30 centimeters across, driven into the ground when they landed. Ground that was no longer ground. Violet substance had wrapped the struts, gripped them, and begun to restructure the metal. "Struts locked," the pilot reported. "Insufficient thrust to break free. Emergency jettison, pyrobolts." Cassian knew the design. He'd flown similar modules in the military. The pilot hit the emergency panel. 4 detonations severed the supports. Freed, Olympus surged upward, leaving 4 steel stumps in the ground. But the underside of the hull had touched the surface. Substance remained there. A thin patch clung to the plating. Cassian saw it through the lower deck viewport. Violet, the size of a hand, ring-patterned. The module climbed. All 4 Arguses rose beside it, including the 3-legged Argus 3, taking positions along the flanks. Below, the land became a spreading violet stain that swallowed heather, brush, lilies, soil, stone. "Growth on the hull," Cassian said quietly to Weiss. "Underneath." The lieutenant looked through the floor viewport. His face did not change. A professional. Granite. "Argus 1, he ordered. "Move beneath the module. Locate and destroy the foreign material. Precision kinetic method. Cut away the contaminated hull section." Argus 1 slipped under the lander. Its accelerator shifted to minimum caliber and fired a controlled series of penetrators, cutting out the plate around the violet patch. The section broke free and fell toward the surface. Clean, but a hole remained in the hull. "Hull integrity compromised," the pilot reported. "Lower deck depressurized. Orbital ascent impossible without repair." "One disaster after another," Cassian said under his breath. Weiss thought quickly. "Seal the lower deck. Climb to maximum atmospheric altitude. Contact the yacht." "Communications unstable," the pilot said, tapping the console. "Interference. Broadband suppression at low frequencies." The entity was jamming them. But Olympus was already at 12 kilometers, and the interference weakened. The transmitter broke through. "Seraphima, this is Landing Module Olympus. Emergency. Requesting crew extraction. Hull damaged. Repeat, hull damaged." "Olympus, understood," Captain Voss answered, alarm sharpening his voice. "Dispatching auxiliary shuttle for intercept. Hold current altitude. Estimated arrival, 14 minutes. 14 minutes. The module hovered at 15 kilometers. Far below, the violet stain continued to grow. It was now visible to the naked eye from the stratosphere. Vertical structures rose from it, spires dozens of meters tall, connected by webs of filaments and membrane. The entity was building. Ilara Seraphine sat with her hands locked together on her knees. Platinum hair had come loose from the braid and lay across her shoulders. The luminous pearls had dimmed. Her azure and gold eyes stared ahead, empty of the young woman who had admired the stars an hour earlier. Beatrice stood beside her. The right hand that had released Sabine's still trembled. She pinned it against her thigh with the left, trying to make it stop. Cassian stood by the bulkhead separating the passenger compartment from the cockpit. His face had gone still. He watched the lower hatch leading to the depressurized deck. The hatch was sealed, indicator green. The light flickered. Green, yellow, green. "Vice," Cassian said without turning. "The lower hatch." The lieutenant approached and watched the indicator. Green, yellow. "The depressurized deck," Vice said. "If any of the substance remained on the inner surface after Argus 1 cut away the exterior plate." Their eyes met. Soldier and aristocrat. Two men trained to make decisions. "Do not open the lower deck," Cassian ordered, "under any circumstances. When the shuttle arrives, we cross over and jettison Olympus." "Yes, Your Grace." 9 minutes. The lower hatch indicator turned yellow and stayed there. A soft scraping came through the bulkhead, barely audible but continuous. The substance was inside, converting the deck, floor, walls, equipment, everything becoming part of it. 7 minutes. Moisture filmed the 8-centimeter steel bulkhead. Not moisture. A faintly violet skin, almost invisible. The substance was crossing through the steel by restructuring its atomic lattice into a medium it could penetrate. "Everyone to the upper section," Cassian ordered. "Docking hatch. When the shuttle arrives, we transfer through the top collar." They climbed the ladder to the upper level. The passenger compartment there was cramped, lined with folding seats. The docking hatch stood overhead. 5 minutes. Lower bulkhead bowed outward. Steel swelled into a blister, and familiar texture appeared across it. Ring patterns, mouth-like openings. The substance had come through. "Argus 2, Weiss ordered. "Fire on the lower deck, kinetic. Destroy it." Argus 2, flying beside the module, rotated its accelerator and fired through the lower hull. Tungsten penetrators shredded the plating and gutted the deck. Olympus bucked and lost stability. The pilot corrected. Through the holes, Cassian saw that the lower deck was already fully occupied. Violet mass filled the compartment, and tendrils reached from the ruptures toward Argus 2. The android pulled away. 3 minutes. The substance climbed the ladder shaft. "Weld the access closed," Weiss shouted. A guard triggered emergency thermite and poured molten metal into the ladder opening. The compound burned white-hot. Heat passed through their suits and forced everyone back. The shaft sealed for 30 seconds. Violet matter ate through the thermite seam as acid eats fabric. A flat, broad limb rose from the opening. Its end unfolded like a fan studded with lens-like structures, dozens of minute lenses, each no larger than a pinhead, aimed upward. At them. It was looking. "Fire!" Weiss opened up with his pulse rifle. The guards joined him. Impacts drove the limb back, but a second rose from the hole, then a third. 2 minutes. The substance filled the ladder shaft. Limbs multiplied, unfolding fans of lenses toward the humans.
dozens of tiny eyes, watching. The docking hatch clanged overhead. The shuttle had arrived. "Up!" Cassian shouted. "Ilara first, Beatrice after her." Weiss caught the princess and lifted her toward the opening. Hands from the shuttle pulled Ilara Seraphine into the transfer tube. Beatrice climbed next, and Weiss shoved her from below in a manner that violated every conceivable court protocol. Guards followed one by one. The pilot came last among them, abandoning control to automation. "Weiss, up!" Cassian remained below. In one hand he held a Hammer 4 thermobaric grenade taken from a guard's belt, a cylinder the size of a fist, capable of turning a sealed compartment into a 4,000-degree furnace. Violet substance covered 3/4 of the deck. 2 meters separated it from him. Tendrils reached. Lens eyes watched. Mouths opened. Inside each mouth lay a structure resembling teeth, but not teeth. A tongue, but not a tongue. "Your Grace!" Weiss shouted from above. "I'm behind you!" Weiss climbed rapidly. His boots vanished into the transfer tube. "Your Grace, hurry!" Cassian armed the grenade. 3 seconds. He threw it into the densest part of the violet mass at the center of the ladder opening and jumped for the hatch. His right foot did not leave the floor. A thin, flat limb had shot from the substance at the instant of the throw and wrapped around his ankle. It was not a thread, but a dense strap that hardened at once like locking pliers around metal. Cassian pulled upward. His body snapped taut. His hands caught the edge of the hatch and slipped across it. A second limb struck his left knee, wrapped it, and dragged him down. He fell face first and rolled at once. A second earlier, his fingers had been centimeters from the rim overhead. The limbs hauled him backward toward the mass. His heels scraped black trails across the deck. 2 seconds. Cassian did not look up. He had no time to lift his head, no time to find Ilara Seraphine's face in the shrinking opening, no time to speak. The limbs jerked him 3 meters across the floor in a fraction of a second. Violet matter closed around his boots and climbed his thighs and torso. 1 second. Inside the transfer tube, Ilara Seraphine turned. She saw his hands reaching for her, fingers clawing empty air. Saw the violet mass rise across his chest. Saw his genetically perfect face, and on it, not farewell, but disbelief, as though, until the last instant, he had never believed he would fail to reach her. Then came animal terror. The grenade detonated. 4,000 degrees turned the upper deck of Olympus into an incandescent cloud. The shock wave punched upward through the hatch. Heat and pressure filled the transfer tube and threw the people inside into the shuttle's cargo bay like rag dolls. Ilara struck a bulkhead with her back. The Aurora Elite absorbed the blow. Its force cocoon flashed and died, nanocircuits overloaded but held. Beatrice tumbled across the deck. Guards slammed into the walls, Aegis armor humming as it dispersed the kinetic energy. The emergency bulkhead between shuttle and transfer tubes snapped shut. Automated pyrobolts severed the collar from the disintegrating module. A shove, a violent lurch, weightlessness. The shuttle tumbled away until its pilot AI stabilized the spin. Through a soot-smeared viewport, Ilara Seraphine saw the remains of Olympus, burning, twisted, warped into spirals by heat, falling toward the planet. The violet mass below opened membranes to receive them. The Argus network registered the termination of life signs belonging to His Grace Duke Cassian Alexander Reinhardt von Ravenholt, heir to House Ravenholt. His icon on Weiss's tactical display changed from green to gray. The princess lay on the cargo deck, Her platinum hair had torn free of the braid. The luminous pearls were dead. Cracks webbed the Aurora Elite suit, and silver nanocircuits flashed yellow as they rebooted. She stared at the ceiling and saw arms reaching toward her, fingers clawing empty air. Beatrice crawled to her mistress, caught her hand, and squeezed. Your Highness, we are alive. Can you hear me? Ilara Seraphine did not answer. Her eyes, the azure and gold created by geneticists for House Solène Vert, looked nowhere. Her pupils remained wide and still. Then she blinked, once, and sat up. Beatrice, she said evenly, so evenly that the maid recoiled. I am all right. She rose, swayed, straightened, looked at Weiss. Lieutenant, contact the yacht. We have a link, Your Highness. Captain Voss is on channel. Captain, Ilara approached the communications panel. Report the yacht's armament. A pause. Voss had not expected the question. Your Highness, under the royal regulations for the security of sovereign vessels, Seraphima Auroris carries a Nemesis II system, 2 torpedo tubes, 16 thermonuclear warheads yield 200 megatons each. Activate the system. Target the 4th planet. Full surface sterilization. Silence on the channel. 3 seconds. 5. Your Highness, Voss said, his voice changed. Forgive me. Kepler 442d is registered to Helios Primatech as an industrial development asset. Use of thermonuclear weapons against a corporate holding without authorization from the Crown Council and the United Colonial Tribunal would result in… Your Highness, forgive my directness, but the consequences would be severe. Corporate litigation, tribunal investigation, possible diplomatic complications with the independent sectors. The Senate will question whether the regulation applies. Captain Voss.
Ilara Seraphine spoke his name the way her father spoke the names of men he intended to dismiss. Without anger, without pressure, with absolute crystalline clarity that allowed no alternate interpretation. I have just lost my husband. More importantly, the surface of that planet is occupied by an unknown combat organism capable of restructuring matter. It consumed my husband. It consumed my people. It is expanding. Every minute we spend speaking gives it more territory. If it reaches the ocean, if it relearns how to build what it once built, it will leave the planet. Then the lawsuits of Helios Primatech will cease to matter, as will the corporation, the tribunal, the Senate. A pause. 2 seconds. Activate Nemesis. This is a direct order from the Crown Princess of the Aurelian Throne, third in succession to the Crown of the 12 Spheres, issued under paragraph 44 of the Royal Regulations. Immediate threat to the Crown and its subjects. Enter it in the ship's log. I accept full responsibility. A final pause, shorter than the others. At once, Your Highness. Activating Nemesis 2. Targeting solution in 4 minutes. Salvo on readiness.
The shuttle docked with Seraphima Auroris. Ilara Seraphine passed through the airlock and along the yacht's corridors, past servants who flattened themselves against the walls, past the chef, past a chambermaid who covered her mouth with one hand. The princess walked in a damaged suit, hair hanging across her face, pearls extinguished, and bracelets cracked. She looked unlike any woman of House Solène Vert in its 1,000-year history, like someone who had passed through hell and returned not to forget, but to answer. She entered the command center. Voss stood beside the tactical table, above which hovered a holographic projection of Kepler 442d. The planet turned slowly. Violet stains spread across both continents, visible from space. The southern continent, site of the mining operation, was almost half covered. The stain on the north, where they had walked an hour earlier, was smaller but growing.
Between the continents, across the shallow sea, ran a band of altered water, opaque and violet. 16 torpedo icons formed a row on the tactical display. Green. Ready. "Targeting complete," Voss reported. 16 warheads at 200 megatons each. Even distribution across both continents and the ocean basin. Combined yield sufficient to destroy the biosphere and strip the upper lithosphere to a depth of 2 kilometers. Your Highness, after sterilization, the planet will remain incapable of supporting any known life for 10 to 50,000 years. Ilara Seraphine looked at the holographic world, at the violet stains spreading across it, at the coral heather that still remained purple around the edges of the continents, chiming in the wind, at the goblet lilies collecting condensation in their bowls, at the snake brush curling its scaled trunks into spirals. All of it would die. Heather, lilies, moss. An entire silicon-based biosphere that had evolved over millions of years would burn in thermonuclear fire, along with the thing that had taken her husband. She did not hesitate. "Fire!" Voss touched the panel. Seraphima Auroris shuddered. 2 torpedo tubes concealed within thickened sections of the hull, disguised as decorative contours, launched 16 weapons. The torpedoes descended toward the planet, drawing thin contrails across the atmosphere. On the tactical display, 16 green icons turned yellow, then red, one by one. The first warhead entered the atmosphere over the southern continent. A 200 megaton thermonuclear detonation turned the mining sector into a lake of molten rock 20 kilometers across. The shockwave flattened coral heather for hundreds of kilometers. Glass stalks became shrapnel, themselves destroying everything they struck. The second, the third, the fourth. Ilara Seraphine stood before the command center's main display and watched. It showed the planet in real time. Flashes bloomed across the surface, one after another, white, blinding, each brighter than the star around which the doomed world revolved. Mushroom clouds climbed into the stratosphere and merged into a continuous canopy of incandescent gas and ash. Kepler 442d's nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, rich in argon, became a poisonous broth of oxides, radioactive isotopes, and vaporized stone. The 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th. The northern continent, the plain where they had walked, the place where Theo Bellamy had fallen into the ground, where Sabine Delacroix had vanished beneath a membrane, where Julien Armand and the convoy soldiers had been dragged into the soil, where Etienne Valcourt had been pulled into the wall. Thermonuclear fire erased it all. The coral heather, the goblet lilies, the snake brush, the violet substance. The bodies of those it had consumed, if anything of those bodies remained. The 9th, the 10th, the 11th, the 12th. The ocean between the continents boiled. Its mineral-rich golden water vaporized across the strike zones, exposing the seabed for an instant before the rock itself melted. The violet band with which the entity had joined the continents ceased to exist. The 13th, the 14th, the 15th, the 16th. The planet burned. Its entire surface, pole to pole, vanished beneath fire and smoke. The yacht's orbital sensors registered temperatures above 3,000 degrees at the centers of impact. The lithosphere cracked, and magma rose through the fractures,
adding planetary heat to the thermonuclear inferno. Ilara Seraphine watched. Voss stood behind her. His arms hung at his sides. His old, scarred face remained still. He had seen thermonuclear detonations before, in exercises, in recordings. Never from 1,000 kilometers away. Never by order of a 24-year-old woman in a shattered suit. Weiss stood at the door with 4 guards behind him. Beatrice de Clermont sat against the wall, hands clasped in her lap, staring at the floor. Minutes passed. The planet continued to burn. A cloud cover of ash and incandescent gas closed over the surface. Kepler 442d became a charred ember, a dark gray sphere veined with red magma beneath its shroud. "Scan the surface," Ilara Seraphine said. Her voice was level, empty. Voss activated deep sensors. The scan required 3 minutes. Data appeared on the tactical display. "Your Highness," the captain reported, "surface temperature exceeds 4,000 degrees at the epicenters. Biosphere completely destroyed. Lithosphere disrupted to a depth of 1.5 kilometers in direct impact zones. The violet substance..." He stopped and checked the readings. "Not detected, neither on the surface nor in the subsurface layers within sensor range." Ilara Seraphine nodded once, briefly. "Captain, lay in a course for the nearest long-range communications station. I need to send a message to my father, and to Helios Primatech headquarters, and to the United Colonial Tribunal. I will compose it myself." "At once, Your Highness." "And Beatrice." "Yes, Your Highness. Have the second cup removed from my suite." She turned and left the command center.
The yacht's corridor. Soft lighting, carpets, paintings. The suite door. The panoramic window. Beyond the glass lay hyperspace. Gray, faceless, stripped of stars. Seraphima Auroris sailed away, leaving behind a dead planet where coral heather would never chime again, and goblet lilies would never open. A world on which nothing remained but fused stone and radioactive ash.